Welcome back. I'm Aaron,
I'm Corey.
and today we're talking about pet peeves in Dungeons & Dragons 5e.
Yeah, so, we were having a discussion off camera about this and some of the things that drive you crazy in Dungeons and Dragons. And, I think that I'm more of an optimist. I try not to think about those things. I'm usually more critical of myself, and I find frustrations inside myself. But there are times where, even when you've been running the game for so long, you can get pretty frustrated at the table. What are some moments that you've had where you felt that way?
I think I could probably talk about a number of moments, but they all center around the authenticity of the game and the group's ability to consistently stay engaged in the story. So, for instance, a big thing for me is side chatter. I would like if there's going to be side chatter, let's do it in character. Let's talk about something that's happening in that world.
Yeah, I have a hard time with the cell phones, especially, and maybe I'm just a little old school. I don't really care for the tablets and the computers. I'm a traditionalist. I like the paper and pencil. I like to know that our technology is put away.
That's a tough sell because, I use that D&D spell app, and it is way more efficient than, flipping through pages. So I think that's kind of an expectation that you have to set with your group, or like you said in the past, which is that's a skill of the DM to steer the people back or to interject when he or she feels the story kind of drifting.
Yeah, and it's interesting now, that COVID's happened. I'm playing on Roll20 with one of my groups, and obviously that is entirely digital. So it's interesting. The first time I ever used digital tools was during 4E. They made an app for character generation, and so everybody at the table had their character on their phone. And nowadays I have one of my gaming groups, they're very much into D&D Beyond, and so their characters are online as well. And it just lends itself to side chatter, like you said. But it's a different type of side chatter. It's the type of side chatter that, while it isn't disruptive to the table, it's disengaging to the player. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, I just don't want to be in a circumstance where I prepped for basically what is the main event of my day. Let's reframe. You're an adventurer. You're on an epic adventure. Are you really thinking about all of these things in your phone? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So along those lines, reality for me is the ability to error. So another thing that's really, really common is everybody wants to, max out their player or optimize the moment in battle. And maybe it's because I've never really been a huge fighting type player or loved that aspect of the game. But errors and blunders and imperfection is what really brings a lot of the drama and fun.
Those two things blend into each other, because when you're in the middle of a combat scenario in Dungeons and Dragons and you're trying to take your turn and somebody's telling you what to do, or, oh, you could have done it this way. We've all kind of been there where that happens. It's not only taking away your opportunity to fail, which is part of the fun of the game, right? You're in a controlled environment where you can make choices that are complete blunders, like you said. And that's part of the fun, right? Failing can be fun. And so not only is that disruptive to your enjoyment of the game, but it's also side chatter. And that's frustrating too, because you're not staying in character, and it seems like what you're saying is that engagement's a huge part of the game for you.
I came to be in a fantasy world, and I spend the rest of my life in this world. And so it's not like, I want to police anybody at the table. I want everyone to have fun. And I think that that's also appropriate. You need to know what the people around you want to get out of this experience.
It's also an endurance thing. Some people can't do that for long periods of time, and I think it takes practice.
That's true.
To keep you in that sort of mindset. I know that some of my friends who are creative types, when they get into that zone, I'm like this too. If I start editing a film or if I'm playing a song and I'm in the zone, I'm a junkyard dog. Leave me alone for 4 hours.
Yeah.
My poor wife, she'll come at me and she knows when I'm locked in the basement, painting minis or editing film, or even if I'm doing work, it's like, yeah, I get pretty bad about it. So when you're playing the game and you're like that, and you're sucked into the world and you're ready to have fun, and someone's taking you out of it, that's tough. And they probably don't even realize that they're doing that too. That's what's even more difficult about the situation, is they probably don't realize they're doing that.
The worst is the side chatter during initiative, during battle, when you should be preparing for what you are going to be doing. And then when it inevitably gets to a person's turn who is just kind of doing whatever or not paying attention, they're not prepared, and then the battle ends up lasting 2 hours because we weren't prepared. So again, we've talked about in the past some house rules.
Or just expectations.
I like to deal with that callously. Again, you have to set that expectation, but you weren't prepared. Well, that happens a lot in battle. A lot of times you didn't do anything.
Yeah, and you have to have that type of group too. I mean, it depends on the dynamics of your group to set those types of expectations, how disciplined you're going to be. My teacher brain kicks in when that happens, where, if somebody's chatting to someone else, I'll take the person who's a vet and I'm like, okay, you go help this person who's new, who doesn't know what they're doing. Clearly you know a lot about combat and rules, so we'll have you help them out. You like combat, so I'm going to have you take initiative, and all of a sudden everybody's getting these little jobs so that they don't have time to side chatter, and we're all collectively working together.
Yeah, well, again, I think every session should start with kind of a warm-up, let's feel out where we are, because again, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of, well, if I'm sitting at a table with a couple of friends that have never really played D&D before, well, my pet peeve about how long battle takes is not going to be a thing, because I'm just happy that they're here to play with me.
Yeah, and if you haven't played in a long time, that's one of the things too. I know for me, one of my pet peeves is scheduling. And I go on Reddit, and you see all the memes on Reddit about how hard it is to get your D&D group together, and they're all really funny, and we've been pretty blessed in that, especially pre-COVID. We were playing every weekend consistently, and I put a lot of effort as a DM into scheduling and setting up our games. And I know some of the other people who run games in our community that we play with have done it as well. It's like I got an image that gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. I got an overview of the story to help you kind of understand what the adventure is going to be. I give you character background information so that you're not lost when you're playing the game. All the leveling requirements I give you, and I'm going to cook for you too when you come over. And so it's like all in, waiting for everybody to just say, yes. I mean, we use GroupMe, and one of my other groups uses a text chain. So, when I see people say, oh, I'm coming, I'm in, it's like, okay, great. But when nobody says anything, it's like, oh, man, you can't just tell me no. Like, just put it out there. Just say yes or no, please. Let me know what my weekend's going to be like.
Well, and there's a layer to that, which is like, I put all this time into this, so therefore I'm emotionally invested in this. And, that's the other tough thing with Dungeons and Dragons is, like, it's a commitment. And so for us to, sustain, showing up at least for, like, a full day every week, that means that that's other time that we're not hanging out with, like, wives or girlfriends or family members, nieces, daughters, whoever. And, it's a big commitment.
Yeah, we make a lot of time for D&D because we have a huge passion for the game, and we have a really solid group, and I know that COVID's made it particularly difficult for us overall, so it's been tough. You have to just have forgiveness and be patient and know that it's just a game, and that's another thing that's a big deal to me is having fun at the table. But my other pet peeve, I would say, aside from just scheduling challenges, I have a hard time with rules lawyering. It depends. I mean, you can use the rules lawyer to help you run the game. My brother is a great example of someone who is the perfect rules lawyer. He's not there to be combative. He's there to help us keep the game moving along. It's like, how does anti-gravity work? And then, all of a sudden he'll just spit out the rules for it because he's a human vault of D&D information. And, we'd be like, oh, okay, cool. No one knows the answer. Let's move on. But it's difficult when you have a player who doesn't like a ruling that you make at the table. Have you ever had that happen?
Well, definitely when you're running it in the classroom with students who struggle with, behavioral and social challenges. Absolutely, there's been some really, really salty moments, but I definitely think that usually it all comes back to, again, setting the expectation that I've always said, dude, I don't know half the rules in this game, and I'm not going to study them. I got a sweet story to prepare for, and also sometimes my rulings are cooler than the rules. You know what I mean? I don't know what that says. Sweet. Roll a D100.
We'll let the fate decide, huh? I just happen to have a chance cube here. Blue, it's the boy. Red, his mother.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just it's fun.
Leave it up to chance.
Well, a lot of the things that I've read / I mostly listen to on podcast format is about Gygax basically saying, like this is the format I envisioned. Like I want you to just kind of create this world and kind of mediate the player's interaction with it. You know what I mean? Who cares about some arbitrary, obscure rule on page 164 of some manual? Sometimes your creativity is, cooler, or just cooler for those people, or it fits the situation better, or it's just different.
And you have to identify that in your table before you play, because there are people who feel quite the opposite, where the rules of the game are what make the game great, right? I've had plenty of players like that. They're very much into munchkinning their characters. They're very much into the structure, the rules of the game. It helps them feel comfortable because they know. It's like they need the black and white. And I think that, players like you and I, we find the gray area of life in general to be very exciting and sort of fun. But those hard limits, those black and white yes or no situations are fun for them. And you just have to set expectations. And I've been saying this for a long time, that Dungeons and Dragons, or any tabletop RPG for that matter, is just fundamentally you're telling a story with friends, family, or people that are interested in the same thing as you. You're telling a story, and people are interacting with that story. It's a game. It's supposed to be fun. So you're having fun telling a story. And I think 5th edition lends itself to doing that better than any other role-playing system that I've played. And if that's what your table agrees to, roll that D100. Have a great time. Leave it up to chance. Keep the story moving. Keep the story engaging and fun, but keep the story moving.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this goes without saying too, but anybody that wants to bring anything like sexualized, go find some other fantasy thing. You know what I mean? There's no quicker, and unfortunately, I think we've both been at tables with this, where somebody wants to make that part of their fantasy experience, and all of a sudden nobody at the table is having fun anymore.
I can't stress that enough. I make that explicit when people come to my table, and I hate to say it, but I kind of shame them for it. Like, your weird fantasy sex stuff, this is not what we do at this table. And I'm very proud to say that I've probably had just as many females as males at my gaming table. And I know that that's kind of a topic that over the years, especially in the earlier days of D&D, it's a big part of like why women don't want to play D&D. It's the stigma of like the nerdy dude trying to fulfill his weirdo neckbeard fantasies.
Yeah.
And I have none of that. I have no patience for that whatsoever. So it's interesting, and it's tough too, because it's an uncomfortable conversation. But I think when you just kind of set it up as I'm not going to roleplay that. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah. Well, and again, you're dealing with difficult territory, because if you're dealing with a real world, like, hey, I run a serious world. Yeah, serious things happen. Human things happen, like human relationships. But that doesn't mean we're going there for what our chapter is covering today in our adventure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's a place for romance in D&D, and I think there are DMs who do it well. I mean, just being critical of myself, I would definitely say that that's an area of my DMing experience that I don't really tap into, but I also don't really have an interest in tapping into it. You know?
I mean, I think the thought in my mind is usually more like, there's a lot in fantasy stories about, political marriages, the intertwinement of families or how that impacts societal change. So I know there's a big, component in my Ura lore, of the Riordan tribes and, kind of the big civil war about how one person came and became like the father of all the tribes. So that's kosher. I think that's right on with
Is that kind of like a Genghis Khan influenced thing, or?
That wasn't what I had in mind, but it's not unsimilar. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I mean
yeah.
You said you draw from history, so it just naturally came to my mind. I think of the Mongols and I think of how that whole society was structured, and it's awesome. It's an awesome tale in history. I mean, not necessarily what they did, but it's...
Yeah. So, and again, it's just same deal. It's when there's, an ethnic cleansing, when there's absolute horrible, just murder. Well, yeah, it's part of the, dramatic storytelling, but I also don't want to play with somebody here that wants to do some kind of weird violence fantasy either. Is it within the context of the story?
Yeah, they want to spend the game torturing someone in some weird manipulative way. I have no interest in that either. Yeah, and you have to ask yourself, does this serve the story, or does this serve your character in some way, shape, or form? And when you're gonna, include things that are a little on the emotional taboo side, like you said, whether it be, some kind of extreme violence or some kind of extreme sexuality, it has to make sense, and that's really the only way that it can be excusable. And it's tough because a lot of times it doesn't make sense. It seems more like you're just being gratuitous with your desires.
I mean, even before the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, when it was ruined on its own, that was a major criticism of the show. It's just are you just kind of gawking for gawking's sake here? It's just we could be advancing the story a little bit.
Yeah, are you just trying to get the shock out of the viewers, and are you just trying to be shocking for the sake of being shocking? What about pet peeves from people who have run the game? When you've been a player in a game, what are some pet peeves you have that maybe the game master has done?
The first thing that comes to my mind is immediately, I remember playing and this particular dungeon master let me be a shapeshifter. And so I was able to shift into smoke. And well, that ended up being a really great idea at this time when the door was locked. I'm oh sweet, I shapeshift into smoke. Oh, you can't do that actually. And I remember there was no good reason for it, or it was oh well, you did this earlier, and I was but you can't even point to a rule in the book. Just come up with something cool. You know what I mean? But if you can't come up with a cool reason why no, and it should fit completely, then just say it, dude, this is gonna break my game.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
And I had that moment. We were playing a game. It was Mike, Nick, my wife, and maybe my brother. And I had created these little blue creatures. They're kind of like gremlins, but they're friendly. But they looked scary, like gremlins. And so, at this particular point in the game, they were just going through the gauntlet. It was just, we're trying to get to this tower. Everything on our path is just a jerk. And so they're just on this murder tirade to just push to the end of this story because they're in this horrible, horrible place. And it turns out that these creatures were actually pretty nice, and my wife just wasted them. And I just didn't think they would do that for some reason. And then little did I know that I was the one who set that up. And I just had to straight up say to her, I just didn't think you were going to kill them. And that's my fault. I planned very poorly for this particular moment. I think that owning it, everybody wants the story to be good. Otherwise, why would you be sitting at the table? And I don't think there's anything wrong with a little humility and saying, I think it's awesome that you have that ability. Right now, I can't tell my story because that ability is going to hinder it. So I can let you do it, and the story ends a little earlier, or we find some kind of compromise, or maybe you can pick a different shapeshift ability, or maybe you can have a spell on the house, or you know what I mean, like a spell-like ability on the house. Like I don't see anything wrong with saying to you like, well, why don't you just take Hellish Rebuke? You know what I mean? You're a shapeshifter, but instead of smoke, maybe you can just make a. Well, there's a compromise.
There's a level of like skill and like ability to improv and think on the fly, but it's just like, throw me something cheap. You're standing on a tile that dispels blah. You know what I mean? Give me something.
Do you feel like that's cheap though? Do you feel like that makes you upset because it definitely feels like that was just placed there in that particular moment to stop you from doing a thing that you have?
The whole game is a big lie. Mm-hmm. If you're gonna shut me down because it breaks your game, again, just tell me straight up, yo, dude, this is gonna break my game, or just like throw me some. How am I supposed to know, anyways, that oh yeah, actually the tile that you're standing on right in front of the door dispels this? Of course, that could be a pre-planned thing, mm-hmm. And quite frankly, I'm not saying this could be a major point of controversy, but as the dungeon master, when I ran it with a class, also you have to like plan for all of your other classes. Especially in the spring semester, I did not like keep it very, very planned, and a lot of times I just did whatever. I was completely improving. A lot of the times I remember rolling behind the visor. It didn't even matter what I rolled. I was going to railroad this part. I was going to let them stand by for this part, mm-hmm. just because I knew I could wield a positive experience for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you're manufacturing the experience, and for especially for kids who have very little experience with Dungeons and Dragons, it's a lot easier to do, and that's where the rules lawyer will kick in, and it'll make it difficult because you want to manufacture a positive experience. They want to work within the constraints of the rules, and you have to find that middle ground. I mean, that's ultimately what it is set expectations, find a middle ground. And then, I think about it from the perspective of Game Master, things that they've done that make me mad. I hate when you can't do the cool thing. And I think a lot of players have a hard time with it. You wanna do the cool thing. You built this character, you got a couple of things that are cool, but you usually have like your one idea or thing you want to do that's pretty cool. And when it just gets shot down, it's kind of heartbreaking.
I remember the first time I wrote Demon on the God's Water, one of the songs for our campaign, we had somebody else at the table who was like, well, actually, I just think that your whole, getting a bunch of people all crazy in the streets is not going to be really successful. And I'm like, well, what's it going to hurt? Is it cool if I just play this song for 3 minutes? Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I remember being so deflated that, like, my whole character, too, was, like, not about fighting, was about being able to, like, my backstory had, like, publications in the city and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, this is a cool outside the box, like, not just show up and kill monsters component here. And then I felt like, yeah, let's just go kill monsters. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes that happens too, and I think it's the dungeon master's responsibility to set the expectation that that's acceptable. I had one player when I first started. We used to always comment on how he would never attack. I mean, we played for years, and he never made an attack.
Is that me?
No. It was actually my friend John, and he was one of the first people I ever played Dungeons.
Regardless of a character.
Yeah. He always played these sort of righteous characters, and they would never attack. It was very interesting. You'd have some role playing in between the scenes, and in a way, he really set the tone for a lot of us, which was, yeah, it doesn't have to be this mechanical game. You can go with it outside of the constraints of the rules. You can do things that are creative, and they should be encouraged. And that's the responsibility of the game master to let you know, hey, I understand that you might feel, person over there, that this is rabble rousing or not helping your cause, but you have to respect their experience and their experience that they're trying to get out of the game, and let them do what they want to do. And you aren't the only one making actions here. I understand that the consequences affect you, and that's why people get upset. It's right? The consequences affect them. But you got to let people make their own mistakes. And I think you see that a lot in life, too. There's a lot of people, just in life in general, who don't want to let you make your own mistakes. They want to kind of control things, and they don't like when things fail.
Sometimes, again, in life or in D&D, mistakes end up not being so like much of a mistake.
It's like Bob Ross.
They take you on the Actually, that just turns into a little push over here.
Happy.
Yeah, I mean, it just becomes what it becomes.
It's just a happy little tree.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think of some of the best moments were me just making a stupid decision, or I remember Kev, like early on in our campaign together, just basically running into an officer and then being like, oh yeah, here's our entire story of how we're guilty. And it's just because you weren't thinking and you just said everything really dumb like. And it was a great moment because it changed exactly how the entire course of everything was going to go.
I love that moment.
Yeah.
Because I was trying, because from the interactions I've had with cops, I was trying really hard to channel that. Because when I had an interaction with a cop, it was just, they just keep asking you questions to get you to incriminate yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's how I role played it. And it was amazing to me that he just
worked.
But it wasn't just him. I play tested that scene with 2 other groups, and there was always someone who fell into that trap. So obviously the police are onto something. It works. They just want to, ask you questions and then get down to the bottom of things. But man, do people incriminate themselves? It's funny. That was one of the most bizarre things about playtesting Felbars, was the fact that there were a couple of scenes of all these groups I playtested it with where it was the same thing every time. And that was one of them. That undercover police officer got someone to incriminate themselves every time. So weird.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But yeah, I mean, pet peeves, at the end of the day though, pet peeves are also one of those things where you got to decide what's going to bother you and what's not going to bother you. Is this something that's going to prevent you from having fun? And so, you can't just complain about it. You got to think about your actionable, choices. What are you going to do? Are you going to talk to the player after the game? Are you going to talk to the game master? Are you going to make some changes in yourself? Are you being reflective? These are the types of questions that I think are missed in a lot of these types of conversations.
Most people are showing up and intending to have a good time. So I would say more often than not, if you just, are open and communicative with everybody at your table, it's typically going to be for the better.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily understand if people explicitly know what that means, though. The ability to talk to somebody after the fact, wait till after the game, say, hey, I saw you made this choice. Let's talk about it. I just want to understand what happened here. Because you get frustrated. I remember one time I had this character, and I could have role-played him a little better. He was kind of a rabble-rouser, you could say. He was a little bit of a troublemaker. But there was an NPC who was not a very nice person. He was pretty nefarious. And it was clear that we were in a combat scenario. And I could have taken him out, and I saw that the DM rolled a 1. And what ended up happening was the DM said, well, he crit you and killed me. And so I felt really cheated. There's one of those moments where clearly the DM is trying to manufacture a fun, exciting experience. But the fact that I just saw that person roll a 1, and it resulted in me just miraculously dying all of a sudden, really made me feel cheated.
I mean, obviously you want to create the sense of reality, and players can die. That happens. Sometimes it's pretty sweet, but also you're not trying to just kill your players. You know what I mean? That's not what it's about. Your players are supposed to be legendary. That's the whole point of telling the story and living it out. Yeah.
One of the things I try really hard to do as a GM is celebrate along with my players. I like to try to take myself, I think like Doctor Strange, where he goes outside of himself, and I like to put myself on the player end of the table, and it's like, you scored that critical hit. You hit the monster and took him out. Everybody's cheering for you. I want to be cheering for you. When I'm running the game, I'm rooting for you guys to kill the monsters. I'm rooting for you guys to solve the puzzles or to interact in a way that's going to be memorable with the NPCs. It's
I remember,
huge.
I remember just the couple of times I got a chance to run for you when I was the DM, and just seeing how excited you got when you had that one thing that you basically said, okay, well, this is the only thing that I really planned for. I'm gonna blow my whole wad here, and you ended up doing like 135 points of damage all in one turn, and it was epic. And first off, honestly, it was probably really, really important, because if you didn't have that, you guys might all die. And but it also showed me like, oh no, I think that exactly what I planned is cool. It allowed for actually a really quick initiative, but a super baller one. But at the same time, this could be something that kills another party, and that was awesome.
I think about what you said with side chatter, and when I was playing a game under you, your Ura campaign, I remember the side chatter I create was in character. You know, I am talking while you're trying to run the game, but I'm having a conversation with Kevin about, you know, the difference between law and chaos and the old ways and the new ways, and we're talking about strategies in game. And so, you know, I gotta go back to my teacher brain where it's like you hear somebody talking in the classroom, you're like, hey, what are you doing over there? And it's like, I'm just trying to figure out how to do this math problem.
Yeah, I remember I walked into the other room in the middle of one of our episodes of that campaign. I was making you guys like taquitos or something, and when I came back, you're like, this is pretty sweet. Like, when you literally left the room and we were just talking about, you know, whatever, your story the whole time. And I think that that's the goal, is to get everybody just doing their own independent thing. I thought it was so cool, too, to, like, have very, very uniquely crafted characters. So, like, every time we'd go to, like, you know, get a piece of pizza or a chicken wing or whatever, it'd be me kind of, like, talking to a different one of you guys from, like, the different perspectives. And again, that's like a real fun thing. I think it goes back to your original point about maybe less cell phone things, and it's just like, let's just pop into the other room and get like a cookie, and you know, I'll share this privileged information with you, so we're still in it. And then the other three or whatever, whoever is in the party is still together talking about whatever.
We used to do that a lot. I kind of veered away from it since cell phones became so popular, but you know, it used to be, oh, you hear what they're saying in a language that only your character understands. Come on with me in the kitchen. I'll tell you what they're saying. Yeah. And now it's, I'm just going to shoot you a quick text. Here you go. That's what they say. You know, and while that is more efficient and that works, you know, there's something very, you know, youthful about, oh, they're going in the side room. They're going in the side room and having a conversation.
So, you know, like definitely once, you know, we get out of this COVID mess, I think hard sell for kind of going back to some of the old school ways. And yeah, hey, come on over here.
Yeah, I want to bring back some of those things too. You see a lot of podcasters talk about some of those old school strategies for running the game, and I think they build human connection. Thank you for joining us today. You can check out our book, Felbar's Shop of Curiosities and Occult, all the way through January 3rd on Kickstarter. It's live right now. Please visit our website, join our emailing list at thecommonlands.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other social media outlets. We appreciate your viewing. Please don't forget to subscribe below. Thank you so much.
He has come to take the city by storm because he cares about making things fair. So Dr. Weaver, beware, the demon is